There are nights when a city holds its breath without knowing why. Nights when something small, unexpected, and almost accidental becomes the spark that changes everything. On an early winter evening in New York City, the marble halls of the Lincoln Arts Center glittered beneath chandeliers as the city's wealthiest patrons gathered for what they believed would be another predictable charity recital. Fine wine, flawless music, polite applause, and a chance to feel cultured for a night. But they had no idea that a single question, spoken with arrogance and amusement, would soon explode into a story told for years. A question asked by the legendary pianist Vincent Sterling. "Hey kid, how about playing something for us? I bet you know happy birthday." Those words would come back to haunt him. Because the boy he mocked, the quiet, blind 16-year-old standing beside the Steinway piano, carried a secret far more powerful than anyone in that golden hall could imagine. His name was David Thompson, and that night, the world would hear his soul. Vincent Sterling, 42 years old, dressed in an immaculate Armani tuxedo, stood center stage like a king surveying his kingdom. Critics worshipped him, orchestras fought over him, and audiences praised his flawless technique. He was the self-appointed guardian of true culture. So when he noticed a blind teenager, dressed simply, holding a white cane, standing near the piano, his irritation flared. He leaned into the microphone. "Come on, don't be shy," he said, dripping confidence and condescension. "Our donors would love to see what inclusion looks like." A ripple of laughter spread through the hall, polished, muffled, and cruel. David stood completely still. His fingers tightened around his cane. Next to him, his public school music teacher stood frozen in embarrassment. She had only hoped to inspire him by bringing him here. She never expected this. Patricia Wells, the event director, whispered sharply to her assistant, "God, this is inappropriate." But she didn't stop Vincent. Because Vincent was the star, and money bows to reputation. Vincent stepped closer. "So tell us, kid, what do you play? Mary Had a Little Lamb? Happy Birthday, perhaps?" Murmurs. Snickers. A room full of adults amused by the humiliation of a child. David lifted his head. His voice was calm, steady, almost serene. "Actually, I prefer Bach." A hush fell over the crowd. Vincent blinked, confused and amused. "Bach? Really?" A smirk curled on his lips. "And what piece could you possibly play?" David didn't hesitate. "Partita number 2 in C minor. But perhaps it's a little too advanced for this audience." The room froze. Some people laughed nervously. Others stiffened, unsure how to react. But a few, just a few, noticed something in the boy's posture. A quiet confidence, unlike anything they had seen from him so far. No shaking hands, no trembling voice, just resolution. Vincent's smile faltered. For the first time that evening, he felt a tiny crack in his authority. It would have been easy for Vincent to laugh it off and move forward. But arrogance doesn't release its grip that easily. He rolled his shoulders back and stepped closer. "Young man, do you understand who you're speaking to? These people finance the finest orchestras in the world. Margaret Rothschild, heiress, patron, and professional critic of anything she deemed beneath her, leaned to her partner and whispered loudly. How rude. Children today have no sense of place. The words stung the air, sharp and icy. But David didn't flinch. His fingers loosened around his cane. His shoulders straightened the way they did whenever he solved complex musical patterns. Something inside him clicked, a silent door unlocking. When Vincent pressed again, David answered softly. "Dr. Sterling, you began the first bars in D major. Partita number 2 is in C minor." A collective gasp. Vincent's face drained of color. Because he had changed the key intentionally. He wanted to expose the boy. Instead, he exposed himself. He scrambled for words. "Obviously, I meant to do that," he lied stiffly. "I was testing your ear." David tilted his head, as if studying the tension in Vincent's voice. "Then you must also know," he said gently, that Bach wrote this after losing his wife. Each movement reflects a stage of grief. It cannot be played with technique alone. It must be played by someone who has known loss. The words hit Vincent like a blow, because everyone in the music world knew the same unspoken truth. Vincent played flawlessly, but without heart. For years, critics whispered what they never dared print. Beautiful but empty, a master of technique, lacking soul. A machine, not an artist. And here stood a blind teenager, dismantling him in front of New York's elite. Vincent's mask cracked. "Enough philosophy," he snapped. "Play, or leave." Patricia Wells stiffened. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. The situation had gone from amusing to unsettling. But David merely nodded. "Before I play," he said, "may I ask the audience a question?" He turned his face toward the room. "Has anyone here ever lost everything they loved in a single moment and had to rebuild their soul one note at a time?" The hall went still. Not one cough, not one whisper, because pain recognizes pain, even when buried beneath diamonds and tuxedos. Deborah Thompson, David's aunt, sitting quietly in the fifth row, felt tears threaten. She knew that tone in his voice. She had heard it the night he learned his parents were gone, and again the night he asked her if music could bring back the dead. Vincent, however, only grew more irritated. "Enough drama," he barked. "Play. Show us this advanced skill of yours." But David raised a hand. "Actually, I'd like you to play first." A murmur swept the audience. David's expression remained gentle, calm almost to the point of unnerving. Vincent, unable to refuse in front of donors, sat at the piano. He flexed his fingers dramatically, and he played flawlessly, technically perfect, cold as marble. People clapped out of habit, but something fell off now. Sterile, hollow. David simply stood there, memorizing every nuance, every pause, every flourish, every weakness. He wasn't preparing to compete. He was preparing to reveal. When Vincent finished, David approached the bench. He placed his cane aside, found the keys with practiced ease, settled his breath. The hall held its breath with him. Then he spoke. Dr. Sterling played the notes Bach wrote. I will play the tears Bach shed. Silence. Then he began, and instantly the room changed. It wasn't just sound, it was truth. Raw, unfiltered, shattering truth poured into notes. David didn't play the partita. He translated it. The opening movement, denial, came alive as a child's hands trembling in a hospital bed. The second, rage, cut through the air like broken glass, sharpened by 8 years of injustice. The third, acceptance, unfolded with the softness of someone who had finally forgiven fate, not for taking, but for leaving him music. People weren't hearing a performance. They were hearing a memory. Dr. Harrison Webb, conductor of the Boston Symphony, leaned forward, whispering, "My God, this isn't talent. This is lived pain. This is genius." Margaret Rothschild, who moments earlier mocked David, pressed a hand to her lips, tears spilling freely. Patricia Wells whispered, "What have we done?" Vincent Sterling felt his world collapse around him, because as David played, he realized what he had never once considered. Technique doesn't make a master. Suffering does. Humanity does. Heart does. And he had none of these. Halfway through the final movement, something happened that many in that hall would later describe as spiritual. David wasn't playing anymore. He was confessing. Every chord was an apology to his parents. Every progression was the rebuilding of a life. Every crescendo was a scream that had lived inside his chest for years. Grown adults wept openly. Music critics clutched their notebooks but didn't dare write. Some patrons bowed their heads as if in prayer. Vincent Sterling, the great master, the untouchable prodigy of his generation, stood next to the piano, trembling. He wasn't watching a boy perform. He was watching his legacy crumble. For decades, he had convinced himself that he was the pinnacle of musical mastery. But David showed in minutes what Vincent had spent a lifetime avoiding. Perfection is nothing without a soul. When the final note faded, David lifted his fingers gently, as if releasing a fragile truth into the air. Then came the silence, a sacred silence, and then a roar of applause. People rose to their feet as if pulled upward by the force of what they had witnessed. Some cried, some whispered prayers, some clapped until their palms stung. David didn't bow. He simply stepped back, breathing softly, as if returning from another world. Vincent Sterling stood frozen, his career, reputation, and illusions, all shattered in 15 minutes. The downfall was immediate. Dr. Webb confronted him sharply. "We will speak about your future with our orchestra, and it does not look promising." Margaret Rothschild opened her purse and began calling donors, not to praise Vincent, but to expose him. Patricia Wells was forced to resign within a week. The public demanded accountability, and when video footage leaked online, including Vincent's mocking introduction, the internet erupted. Musicians condemned him. Critics tore apart his legacy. Students denounced his arrogance. Vincent Sterling's empire collapsed. Within months, he was reduced to teaching occasional lessons in community centers. And David? His life changed forever. 6 months later, David Thompson stepped into the halls of Juilliard School of Music, not as a visitor, but as their youngest full scholarship recipient in history. He woke each morning to the sound of Central Park rather than dripping pipes in a church basement. He practiced on Steinways instead of damaged keyboards. He learned under maestros who treated him as an equal, if not a superior. Margaret Rothschild funded outreach programs in his name. Patricia Wells publicly apologized and began advocating for artistic inclusion. David performed at Carnegie Hall, then at international festivals, then with symphony orchestras. His interpretations were described as soul-shattering, transcendent, proof that God exists in sound. And through everything, Deborah walked beside him, the aunt who believed in him before the world did. Vincent watched David's Carnegie Hall broadcast from a tiny apartment in Queens. His penthouse was gone. His sponsorships vanished. His reputation dissolved. David's performance brought him to tears, not out of admiration, but because every note reminded him of who he could have been, if only he had played with humanity instead of ego. His arrogance didn't just ruin a moment. It ruined him. When David released his first album, it became the best-selling classical record of the decade. At its launch, he said, "Music doesn't belong to the privileged. It belongs to anyone with a heart that needs healing. Art is the great equalizer." And he meant it. He used his fame to build programs for children from poor communities, children who reminded him of himself, children the world overlooked. He taught them the same lesson he learned the hard way. The best revenge is building something greater than the people who try to break you. Have you ever witnessed someone underestimated, someone dismissed, someone mocked, only to watch them rise above everyone's expectations? Did you stay silent? Did you speak up? Did it change you? Share your story below. And remember, genius has no color, no class, no privilege, only courage.